First up, to talk about fixed assets module, again, get your popcorn ready. This is going to be exciting here, is Mr. Ryan Balser. Ryan, I will let you take it from here. Stop
Awesome.
my
Thank you,
share.
Aaron. All
You're
right,
very
let me go
welcome.
ahead and share my screen here, team. All right. I'm going to start off with a little slide deck. Let me just get some things situated here. All right. Can everybody see my slide deck? All right. Guys, we are going to start this user group off talking about fixed assets management in NetSuite. So I have a couple slides to get us started here. So real quick, over the next 15, 20 minutes, what's our agenda going to be? Going to do a brief introduction of myself so that everyone knows who I am. And then we're going to jump right into fixed assets management in NetSuite, right? We'll review the dashboard. We're going to briefly review a little bit of the setup and some of the things that you can control in the software for fixed assets management. So the settings, asset types, and we'll talk about the different depreciation methods that we can create in NetSuite. From there, we're actually going to go through the process of how do I create that asset in NetSuite, right? I go through that proposal process, then go to the creation, then we actually will create that asset record. We'll review that and look at how the depreciation works over time, and then we'll end with some reporting out of the box that we have for fixed asset management in NetSuite. So real quick, team, brief introduction. My name is Ryan Balser. I am a solution or a principal consultant and solution architect here at Oasis Solutions. So play a couple roles in the practice, both on the delivery side and support our sales team as well on the front end. Been with Oasis for about 2 years now. I've been in the NetSuite ecosystem for almost 12 years now. As Aaron said earlier, both in the industry side and on the consulting side. So I actually found NetSuite about 13, 14 years ago. I was working for a 3PL light manufacturer here. I'm based out of Columbus, Ohio. We were looking for an ERP to implement. We chose NetSuite and managed that instance for about a year. Was looking for a change and got into consulting to help folks like y'all implement and maintain and optimize your NetSuite environments. Couple of NetSuite certifications there. I do specialize in the distribution manufacturing vertical within NetSuite. I am a graduate of the University of Cincinnati, but as my teammates know, I'm a Buckeye at heart, based out of Columbus, Ohio. All right, so what are we going to look at in NetSuite today when we're talking about fixed assets? So ultimately, when we're talking about fixed assets, right, it's going to start with some transaction, right? And there's a handful of different transaction types that we can create fixed assets from. So things like item receipts, vendor bills, journal entries, inventory transfers, those can all be the underlying transactions that we use to then create that fixed asset record in NetSuite. I'm going to repeat those one more time because that might be important later on. So remember, item receipts, vendor bills, journal entries, and inventory transfers are some of those transactions that we can create fixed assets from. From the underlying transaction, we will go into an asset proposal, right? Where NetSuite will look and propose all those fixed assets that we should be creating. We do have an approval process there, so we can accept or we can actually reject that fixed asset proposal if we didn't want to create it at that time. But once we do, that's when we create that fixed asset record, right? That fixed asset record is going to then, we're going to then run depreciation based off of the depreciation method that we assign that fixed asset, right? So NetSuite will automatically do that depreciation for us. And then ultimately that causes the asset to revalue. And at the end of its lifetime, we can then dispose of that fixed asset. All right, enough slides. Let's jump over into the software. Before I do, I want to bring up a spreadsheet, right? So how many people out there that manage their fixed assets for their company, for the companies they work for, have a spreadsheet like this or similar to this? I'm guessing quite a few. The reason I'm guessing that is because I actually took this visual from my wife, who's a controller of a manufacturing company, and this is actually her fixed asset schedule here that she maintains on a monthly and yearly basis. So again, you have multiple complicated tabs, right? You have formulas that reference other tabs. All this stuff we have to maintain in Excel, and what happens if we fat finger something, or we mistype something, or we mess up a formula, right? Now we're spending time digging into the spreadsheet and trying to figure out where the errors are. Ultimately, what we want to do today, team, is give you a tool and a solution to eliminate this offline need to manage your fixed assets. All right, let's jump over into NetSuite. All right, guys, you can see I logged into NetSuite here. The first thing you'll notice, if you have the fixed asset module installed, you will have a navigation link up here for fixed assets. If I click on that fixed assets, it will actually take me to a fixed asset a fixed asset dashboard, right, that we can configure and look at. From this dashboard, we have our shortcuts that we're used to seeing. We have all of our links to get to the different areas within fixed assets, but then we have some other portlets. So we can very easily, at a glance, see all the fixed assets that we're managing. We can see the asset type. We can see the original cost. We can see what that current cost of that asset is, things like the depreciation method, that sort of stuff. So again, from this dashboard, we have a lot of quick information at our fingertips to help us manage those assets in NetSuite. We also have some trend graphs that are specific to fixed assets too. So if you want to look at your fixed assets yearly, quarterly, right? Again, if we're used to trend graphs in NetSuite, but we have additional trend graphs when we install that fixed asset module. All right, guys, I do want to touch just briefly on the setup of fixed asset before we do a walkthrough of that asset proposal and creation. So if I hover over my fixed asset menu up in my blue ribbon navigation, I can come down to setup and I can do this. We have some system setup that we can do for our fixed assets. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this call going through all the different settings. That wouldn't be very exciting. But again, you can see, you can determine what to do if you need to, or how you want to post if the period's locked or closed, right? APAR, that sort of thing. You have different, you have different preferences that you can set for your assets, different ways that you can control the proposal and creation. Same with the depreciation and disposal, right? So we do have quite a bit of setup that we can control when we're implementing fixed assets. Once we go to the settings, the next thing we want to look at are the asset types. So before we define any fixed assets or create any fixed assets in NetSuite, we have to define fixed asset types. So if I look at the ones that we have in our demo account, I'm just going to open one that we already have here. So our fixed asset types are ways that we can group and kind of pre-fill some information on the assets when we create them. So when we're looking at our fixed asset types, we have a name and a description. We're going to define that depreciation schedule or that accounting method that we're going to use to depreciate our fixed assets. We're going to touch on this a little bit more here in a second. We can define for this particular type of fixed assets, is there going to be a residual percentage that I want to maintain? What's the asset lifetime that I want to depreciate over, right? Those are the things that we would see in the header. We come down here, we have some other subtabs below. So again, a general subtab. So again, just things that we're, ways that we can kind of automate filling in this information on our assets when we create them. So who's the custodian, that sort of thing of the fixed assets. When I go to my accounting tab, team, this is where we define all those GL accounts that are impacted while we're depreciating, while we're writing down our fixed assets. So again, we can set these here, and then these will flow over to the fixed asset as well. And then we can define some maintenance. We can define some maintenance information as well. I'll touch more on this once we get into a fixed asset record here in NetSuite. But ultimately, what I wanted to touch on here was before we create any fixed assets in NetSuite, we do have to define certain types of fixed assets. Again, they hold some values and they can group our fixed assets together. All right, so once we've looked at some settings, we've looked at some asset types. The next thing that I want to touch on are the depreciation methods. So you can see out of the box, NetSuite comes with about 30 to 40 of the most common depreciation methods that you'd be used to seeing. So if I open one of these up, right, so 15% declining balance, for example, these depreciation methods will hold things like the name and the description, of course. Also the depreciation period, are we depreciating it monthly, annually, that sort of thing, right? And then ultimately down here is the formula that we use to calculate the fixed assets. So we have 35 to 40 out of the box in NetSuite that we can choose. We also have the ability to create our own depreciation schedule as well. So if I want to create a new depreciation method, I can click on here. And using these operators on the side, I can create my own custom depreciation formula. So if for some reason one of the out of the box isn't working for the team, we can either take that, tweak that a little bit, or we can create a new depreciation method by scratch. So those are some of the nuts and bolts behind the setup of fixed assets. Let's take a look at the actual process. So the first thing that we would want to, the first step in creating a fixed asset is going to be that asset proposal. So if I hover over my fixed asset menu and I go to transactions, I have asset proposals. So this is a thing that we can run in NetSuite, right? We basically will set the date range, we'll set what subsidiary we want to go out and look for, and we can define the asset types that we want to go out and look for, right? And we can define multiple asset types. Once I click propose new assets, NetSuite is going to take this information on the asset proposal screen and it's going to search transactions in NetSuite, those transactions that we listed earlier, right? The item receipt, the vendor bill, that sort of thing. Going to search those transactions and look for assets that might need to be created based off of those transactions, right? So after we run this asset proposal process, we then come into fixed assets transactions and we can manage those asset proposals. So once we run that, once we run the proposal engine, NetSuite's going to go out and it's going to find, based off of the transactions, some assets that we think we need to create. So here is a fixed asset proposal record. I'm going to go ahead and open it up and we can take a look at what's in here. All right, so here's my asset proposal record, team. Again, based off of the item that it's proposing, it's going to have an asset type assigned to it. We can define the status of this proposal, right? Here's a description. Here's our accounting method, right? So straight line depreciation over 180 months, no residual value at the end. If you look down here in my bottom left-hand corner, it will actually tie this fixed asset proposal to that bill or that transaction that's going to be creating this. So if I open this transaction up in NetSuite, all right, this is the actual underlying vendor bill that is being used to create that fixed asset record. Why did it define this bill as a bill that needed a fixed asset created from it? Well, it's got this item on here, okay? So let's take a look at this item real quick and I'll explain why this is then showing up as an asset proposal. All right, one thing to note, one thing to call out. So these are non-inventory items, right? They're not necessarily inventory items in NetSuite, but we're managing the asset record itself from here on out. But on the vendor bill, we had a non-inventory item. That non-inventory item under the accounting tab was associated to this fixed asset account. So that's what drove NetSuite in this asset proposal screen, in this asset proposal screen to say, hey, we have a vendor bill with an item on it that's defined as a fixed asset. So we need to create that fixed asset record in NetSuite. All right, from here, we have the ability to select here. We can generate the asset. We can reject that asset if we didn't want to create that if we didn't want to create it for whatever reason. But here's kind of that approval process of are we going to generate that as a fixed asset? Are we not? All right, once we go through this managed proposal and we create our fixed asset, we will then have a fixed asset record in NetSuite. So if I come over here to fixed assets in list, I can view all of the assets that I'm managing. So here's a list. I'm going to open up one so we can take a look at what all is on these fixed asset records. All right, team. So these are the records that we manage for our fixed assets from here on out, right? So we have things like the ID, the name, the description. If there's a serial number that we want to associate that with this fixed asset, again, we can list all those data points here on the record itself. Here's where it's tying its asset type. Here's where we got its original cost, what the current cost is, right? What the depreciation method, all that stuff that was defined by those asset types. Coming over here, we can see what the current net book value is and what the cumulative depreciation of this asset is as well. So that's all the information that we're storing in the header record of our fixed assets. If I come down here, we do have subtabs. So these subtabs are going to contain some more information about this fixed asset. So again, the general subtab, a lot of this is brought over from the asset type, but we do have the ability to override that for this particular fixed asset, right? So again, what subsidiary is it related to? Who's the custodian? What's the physical location, right? We have things like how much has this been depreciated? When was the last depreciation date, right? Just some general information about this fixed asset. And team, the nice thing is, and I know all the participants out there, I think by and large, are currently using NetSuite. So remember, anything that's on an asset record as a data element, we can pull into save searches, right? So if you want to create your own save searches for your fixed assets, these are all things that we're able to bring into save searches. Over here on the right-hand side, you'll see here's where it again ties it to that vendor bill. So we always can have a link to that underlying transaction that created this record. And if there was a preceding purchase order, it's going to associate it with the purchase order here as well. So again, one click, I can get to either one of those underlying transactions that created this fixed asset record. Again, we have the accounts tab. So what GL accounts are going to be affected as we're going through and depreciating this fixed asset? We can maintain insurance information as well, right? So who's the insurance company? Is there a policy number, policy start, end date, that sort of thing? Again, team, if we're thinking for reporting purposes, right? Very easy to pull a save search that says, show me all my fixed assets where my end date is within the next 60 days, something like that, right? So we can maintain insurance information on that asset as well. We can do the same for maintenance as well. So who is the maintenance company? Is there a maintenance contract, right? When was the last time we inspected this record? When's the next time we need to inspect this record? All that stuff, all the good stuff about maintenance. And again, for reporting purposes, it's very easy then to pull those into reports so that we can have that information and maintain and make sure that we know who to call for any questions on maintenance. Again, we have some other subtabs here. So when we do a sale or dispose of it, right, we have that information captured here. We also, if I can draw your attention to the very last subtab, this is our depreciation history, right? So if you remember that complicated spreadsheet that we were showing earlier that we had to maintain all the depreciation history on, NetSuite's going to do that automatically. So on my depreciation history schedule, I can click and it's going to show me this fixed asset. So here's the schedule of depreciation. I'm going to scroll down to the beginning here. Here is where NetSuite was taking and depreciating those fixed assets when we were running the depreciation schedule on it. You'll know, so again, what's the original value? How much, based off of the depreciation method, how much are we depreciating it that month? And then what's the residual value after that? NetSuite will even tie these to the journal entry that it uses to depreciate that fixed asset. So if you ever have a question on that transaction that actually depreciates it, it's linked right here on the asset record. So again, with one click, it can take you to this journal entry, and it will show you how it maintained or what it did for the depreciation there. All right, team. So let's take a quick pause here. What have we done? We looked at the fixed asset management dashboard, showed you some of the new portlets that are included with fixed assets. Looked a little bit at the setup. How, what are those fixed asset management settings? What are those asset types? How do we define the depreciation method? How do we create new depreciation methods? And then we walk through the asset creation, right? Through the asset proposal, we're then able to manage those proposals. That then creates the asset record itself, which then is used to maintain all the depreciation schedules. We can also hold insurance and maintenance information on there as well. So what is the process then to actually depreciate these? So there is an engine that we run. So in fixed assets, we can go to transaction and we can go to asset depreciation. Again, we can define what asset types do we want to run the depreciation engine on, for what subsidiaries do we want to run the depreciation on, and what's the period that we want to run for those fixed assets, right? We depreciate the asset, or sorry, we click depreciate asset. That then takes us to the process screen, and this is where then NetSuite goes out, looks at your fixed assets, looks at those depreciation methods, runs those depreciation schedules against your fixed assets, and creates those journal entries to depreciate it on the books. Again, no longer maintaining complicated formulas, multiple tabs in the spreadsheets that are prone to user error. One thing I did want to touch on, so we did talk earlier about those different transaction types that we were able to create fixed assets from, things like vendor bills, item receipts, journal entries, right? Those type of underlying transactions. What happens if I don't necessarily have an underlying transaction, but I want to create a fixed asset in my system to manage? It's not a problem. We can do that ad hoc as well. You can scroll over fixed assets, transactions, asset creation, right? And we can create a fixed asset without an underlying transaction to create it from. So you can just create them ad hoc one at a time if you needed to. All right, team. I want to finish up with just a little bit of reporting that we have that we can look at in NetSuite when it comes to fixed assets. So again, no longer maintaining complicated spreadsheets, we can set up the reports to be automatic for us in NetSuite. So if I hover over a fixed asset and I go to my reports, I can generate reports that I want to view. Again, what's the report type that I want to generate for what, or what's the start date? What's the end date I want to generate those reports for? Right? Which assets do I want to include? All assets? Do I only want to include leased assets? That sort of thing. What asset types, right? So here I can define what all I want included in that report that I'm generating. From here, I'd click generate, and it would take me to a status screen that shows the process or where the processes are for creating those reports. All right, once those reports run, then I can come to my reports. And team, this is where our reports that we generated are going to be stored, right? It's going to store the last 30 days by default up here. And here we can come back and we can reference all these reports. We can even download them in PDF or XML. So we'll take a look at the PDF and look at this depreciation schedule by net book value. So again, instead of that big complicated spreadsheet with all those formulas and all those tabs, we're able to create and maintain these, create and generate these reports automatically in the system based off of those depreciation schedules. All right, team, so just a quick recap. All right, what did we look at? So we looked at those underlying records, those item receipts, vendor bills, journal entries, transfers, right? Those are the underlying records that we can use to create our fixed assets. We can create them ad hoc one at a time if we want to as well. That's not an issue, right? But from these transactions, it goes into an asset proposal where we have the ability to create or reject that fixed asset. right? That fixed asset is going to hold a lot of information, depreciation schedules, depreciation histories, insurance, maintenance information. We then run the depreciation engine against that fixed asset record, which then creates those journals to depreciate it based off of the method. And then ultimately at the end of its lifetime, we can then go and dispose of the fixed asset. All right, team, I appreciate the 20 or so minutes that you gave me. If anybody has any questions or wants to learn more about fixed assets, maybe it's something that you've talked about during the implementation, maybe it's something that you wanted to push to a phase 2. If now's the time to start talking about fixed asset management in NetSuite, reach out to Oasis, reach out to Robin. We would love to do a deeper dive, get a little bit more information about your particular use cases and help you automate your fixed asset management. Appreciate the time, everybody. I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron